Hello and welcome to another video. And today we are going to be taking a look at my Restful Refreshments project. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, then you have probably seen the updates of this project. I've been working on it for a couple of months now. It is a personal project, so it's taken a little while. But we are finally finished and I am so pleased with it. It's been probably one of the most enjoyable projects I've worked on in a very long time. So in this video today, I'm going to take you through the instructional design, kind of how I came up with the concept for this project, and also obviously the graphics and how I created those as well. If you are new here or you don't follow me on LinkedIn, my name is Emma Berry and I'm an e-learning developer and instructional designer. And I come from a graphic design background, so I love to push the boundaries of these softwares to create courses that are beautiful, functional and accessible too. So let's go into PowerPoint and I will start off by just talking you through how I came up with this idea and sort of began to flesh it out. So it was really important before jumping into Rise and creating any of the graphics to get the content signed off and to be really sure about what I wanted to be in this course. And this is because if I had kind of just written the content into Rise, added the backgrounds, if I then wanted to move stuff around, when creating this very kind of seamless effect, that actually ends up creating a lot more work for you in terms of having to then rechange and edit the graphics and move the blocks up and down and everything. So it was really sort of like important that the content was completely signed off first. And of course there could be, in a real life project, there could be tweaks and things, but you want it kind of like 99% perfect at this stage. So we'll come back to the look and feel in a second, but let's just start with the brief. So I set myself a brief to create a 5 to 10 minute onboarding course for new colleagues, new employees of this faux tea company called Restful Refreshments. And the idea with this onboarding course was it would be a sort of knowledge-based, quick micro-learning that would provide these new employees with an idea as to the company ethos, their mission statement, their values, and details of kind of the hero products and how they deliver good customer service and create their customer experience. So this wasn't meant to be role specific. It was very much sort of like a overview style course that would then form part of a wider kind of curriculum or induction curriculum where learners would go on to do role specific training. And I have found with induction training is that companies tend to over kind of do on the bits that they don't necessarily need to. So for example, with the company history, every time I've done an induction course, it's always had like a 10 to 15 minute just section on like the timeline, how the company started, who founded it, which obviously can be useful information. But I feel like as a person going into working, for example, in a shop or, for a restaurant or whatever, you more so need to know how you need to behave and embody the company values and how you need to deliver customer service in line with how the company wants you to. That kind of practical information is actually more useful than knowing the 100-year history of the company. So for this course, I really wanted it to be very kind of punchy, I suppose, in that it's getting to the point. It's not going into these massive timelines on where things began, and it's very tangible and useful and relevant information. So I positioned Restful Refreshments as a premium brand. So the product is a premium product. They sell sleep teas. And in my head, this would kind of be wholesaled in stores like Marks and Spencer's, Lakeland, Selfridges. And this is important to define because this impacts the overall tone of voice of the course, the look of the course, how I created the graphics, and all of that kind of stuff. I think particularly with induction courses, when this might be the first kind of look or introduction that a new employee is getting to the company, you really want the course to embody everything that company is saying. So those values, the the level of, for example, this is a premium product, you want the course to feel premium as well. It needs to reflect what the content is actually saying. So it was really important to define this before, again, getting into any of that graphic design or look and feel or anything. And the course should be responsive. So because it's a 5 to 10 minute micro learning, I wanted it to be able to be completed on mobile devices or tablets. For example, if you have got a new employee in a store, then having being able to complete it on a tablet would be hugely beneficial. They don't have to then be glued to a desk. Okay. So from here, I then defined the learning gap and the profile. So we can assume that these learners will know a small amount about the company. Obviously, they would have gone for an interview, got the job. So we can assume that they have a positive impression of the company too. So, it's not likely they would have taken the job if they absolutely hate Restful Refreshments and everything it stands for and the products they sell. So you can kind of start to form this fact-backed assumptions about these people. So this e-learning is there to provide a learner with a basic understanding of Restful Refreshments, their values, mission statement, any company policies, to provide an overview of the hero products and the best sellers, so the ones that this new employee is most likely going to be either selling or dealing with customers about or wanting to promote. An insight into the company tone of voice. So this includes the responsibility that learners have in terms of how they embody the brand and speak on behalf of the company, and detail of the customer experience and how this is delivered in a way that supports the company ethos and mission. So that is kind of like positioning the level in terms of where this module sits. So it's very much at that understand level. It's just taking in that knowledge and knowing how to apply it. And then they will then apply that during that role specific training, which would be a separate thing. From here, I could then sort of fill out the course structure and the platform. And I think it's really important to be transparent about these kind of projects in that I actually did use ChatGPT to help me bring a lot of this together. Not to write the content, I did that myself, but in terms of getting this course structure together and creating Restful Refreshments brand itself, I use ChatGPT quite a lot because this is a personal project. I'm not getting paid for it. So I wanted to speed up that process of creating that company and just giving me this outline that I could then take. And I then adapted things, changed it to fit kind of that brief and that learning gap, and filled out the content myself. But I think as IDs and developers, it's really important to be transparent when we're using these tools, because whilst I do think there's still some moral and ethical issues around AI, it actually can be helpful, and it's important to identify where it can be helpful for us in our own practice. But anyway, so you will see by this, I actually originally was creating this in PowerPoint in iSpring. And when I started this project, I was doing the review and trial of iSpring. And I thought this was going to be a great project to kind of use because I really wanted to utilize that more of transition. But what I actually found was when I started building this out, that the player was sort of translating the more of transition different to how it was appearing on PowerPoint. And from that, I realized it wasn't actually adding much value. And whilst iSpring can be viewed on multiple devices, it wasn't giving the best view in terms of that responsiveness. So I did a quick pivot to Rise, and the content could largely stay the same. I still had very similar ideas in terms of like carousels and flashcards and stuff. So there wasn't much in terms of adapting that. And here is the course structure. So as you can see, I sort of broke it down into these topics, gave rough timings, and started to kind of give a very brief overview as to the interactivity for each of these sections. And then we just went on to the storyboarding, and this is where I started to write all the content, to flesh it all out. And this is the content that was seen on screen. So I write exactly as I want it to appear on the e-learning. This way, if it was a live client project and it went to review, they would sign this completely off, or I would do any more changes or whatever before getting in the authoring tool. So as you can see, to create something like this, there is still a significant amount of instructional design behind it before we even get into all the pretty stuff and the nice exterior. But alongside the same time, I was building out this look and feel on this brand. And I created this logo, which is just literally two different fonts. Kept it very simple because, as I've mentioned, obviously this being a personal project, I didn't want to go too much into creating this branding portfolio because that's not what the project was about. But I did pull together a colour palette and, of course, created some accessible colour pairings too to ensure that this course was going to be accessible. So for the look and feel inspo, I knew that I really wanted this to be very dreamy feeling, quite soft, talking again about that embodying the brand and what they're standing for and the products that they're selling. This had to be very much translated in the look and feel as well. And I wanted an illustrated style, so I didn't want to use too much photography because, again, this obviously was a made up brand, so I wasn't working with an image bank here. So I thought illustration was probably the best way to go. But it was really important that this wasn't cartoony. Being a premium product, I wanted this to feel very sleek. So I didn't use any cartoon characters or anything like that. I just felt that that would potentially not give off the right tone of voice or the right kind of feel that I was going for. And we were looking for something that was kind of inspired by nature. Restful Refreshments sells sleep teas that are natural, use all natural ingredients. So I wanted this translated as well throughout the look and feel. And I pulled together some inspiration from Pinterest. So I often use websites as my inspiration when creating these because they are designed in this continuous way, the same way that I like to design the Rise courses. And I absolutely loved this one here with the mountain backdrop and everything. And particularly for the colour scheme, you've got these kind of dark blues, the purple and the peach, which give kind of like sunset vibes. So it was really kind of close to what I had in my head as to what I wanted this to look like. So that is kind of what formed this colour scheme here. And then at this point, I was still working in iSpring, so I started to pull together these stills as to how I wanted it to look. But obviously, I then switched to Rise, and thankfully, because I already had a lot of these graphics done and I'd already started to build quite a significant amount in iSpring, I was able to use a lot of these graphics. I just had to do a little bit of moving around to get them to fit Rise, because obviously, iSpring functions very similarly to Storyline in the sense that it is a kind of landscape orientation, sort of slide based, whereas Rise is that continuous and responsive platform. So let's jump into Affinity Designer now, and I will talk through the graphics, which I feel is the long-awaited bit of this this video and what everybody wants to know about. So we will jump in there, and I'll talk you through kind of how I created the backgrounds and a little bit about sort of pulling together the look and feel of this project. So you are kind of getting a look into the inner workings of my brain here. And for any other graphic designers out there, they're probably screaming at how chaotic this is. I'd love to say I'm one of these people that has nicely lined up, neat artboards with different labels for what they represent, but I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm very chaotic with it. And you can see how my brain sort of worked as I've added things. So this is kind of what I work with when I create these illustrated Rise courses. And I want to kind of preface this by saying that although this might look overwhelming to somebody that doesn't do graphic design or doesn't have a background in visual design, I would say that don't panic, because actually what I'll go into is a lot of this was not hand created by me. So if I zoom in here, we can see I've pulled together the stills of this course as kind of flat images. And at first glance, you might look at this and go, oh my gosh, there is so many different, there are so many different background designs here. This must have taken ages. And yes, to be real, it is quite time consuming kind of illustrating a course like this, but not as time consuming as I think people think it is. So for example, you can see if I zoom right in, you can see that the blocks are designed to have these floral decorations either side. And these decorations are actually are made up of like 6 different flowers, I think it was. And then all I've done is reposition them and recolor them and repeat them throughout. And I design things as this kind of continuous page to avoid repetition. So you can see here, I'm able to look at this and go, okay, it's all good. We don't have any kind of repeating flower designs or anything. For example, this purple one here, it doesn't appear until the next part of the e-learning. So it allows me to identify where there is any blank space that might need filling, or where perhaps things are too busy and I need to give things a bit of breather space, which we can see here with this very heavily illustrated section kind of header. The next bit is like an image carousel. And having some flowers here, I originally toyed with it, but actually it was making it far too busy with how much is actually going on the screen. So it allowed me to kind of pace the course well as well in terms of the aesthetics. So in terms of these flowers and everything, I will let you in on a little secret, and that is that I didn't actually draw these myself. Although, I've come from this kind of background, hand illustrating, these elements would have taken ages, and to be honest, wouldn't have been worth the reward. Even if this was a live client project, I probably wouldn't, unless they needed something very specific, hand illustrate anything. It never ends up being worth the amount of time that it takes unless you have a dedicated graphic design team. So these are all taken from stock sites. I think I typed into Freepik sort of flowers or floral and downloaded the vector graphics, and then I just recolored them to suit my color scheme, and then positioned them around the screen and layered them. And they're from different like files, so I didn't get these all from the same place. I had to look around a little bit, and the same for like the teacup and stuff. But the kind of shell or the sort of original design was taken from the stock site. The same goes for any photography as well. And if we look at these shots here where I've got kind of the information about the products themselves, obviously these products don't exist. So trying to find imagery for this would have been incredibly difficult and would have probably taken a lot of photoshopping. In this instance, I've actually used the AI generator in Freepik to create this very specific product imagery. So we've got the lavender and the lemon tea, we've got the teacup with the lavender in, and obviously finding this would have been impossible on a stock site. So again, this is where I've used AI to actually help me here. And for a live client project, I probably wouldn't necessarily go down this route because I'm still sort of figuring out the kind of copyright implications and the morality of using AI imagery. But hopefully, working with actual kind of real life organizations, they'd have a bank of product imagery. So this is just how I got around it for the sake of this kind of personal project. But yeah, again, all of these these lemon slices here, which do look a little bit like oranges now I'm looking at it, the tea bags, all of this was all taken from stock sites and then just recolored. So although for people that aren't graphic designers or visual designers, this might seem overwhelming, it's actually a lot more achievable than you think it's going to be. So perhaps probably one of the most asked questions I get is what block sizes or what sort of pixel sizes should I use when creating my block backgrounds? And unfortunately, I'm going to disappoint because I can't answer that specifically. It really does vary based on the type of background you're creating, what it is, what's on the background, what you want to be visible on screen, what type of block you're creating. So you'll see here we've got two blocks or two designs. And these were both for text blocks within Rise, even though I've completely labeled it wrong, so ignore that. And you can see that they're the same width, but they are different depths. And this is very much brought about by trial and error. So I whip up these kind of designs. I then input them into Rise, see how it looks. I look across the different responsiveness, like the device views, see how it looks. And then I tweak from there, and then you kind of rinse and repeat until you find something that you're happy with. When you do find a sizing that works there, you can replicate it like I've done here. And this slightly deeper design was for more text, and this was for less text, but they have the same width because I found a width that works with these kind of floral designs on the side. The same goes with these blocks backgrounds here. So these were for the multiple choice questions at the end. And this was for one with slightly more feedback, because if anybody knows how Rise works, it kind of like zooms in when you choose an answer and you get your feedback. And this was for a multiple choice question with less feedback. But again, they've got the same width, they follow very similar design, they're just different depths. So you can start to kind of build your own sort of template pack, I guess, of assets and background sizes, and which you can then replicate across different block designs. And you'll find that actually some of them can be multi-purpose. So this, which was originally designed for text, also works on flashcards, or could also work for the text over image and things like that. So you might find you accidentally create kind of multi-purpose backgrounds too. And if you're going for something that's maybe not as illustrated as what I've done, you could also save these as templates within Rise, so that you don't have to keep exporting things. You can literally just add them in, and it'll save time on your build as well. Okay, so you can see here where I've sort of translated things over from iSpring. So we've adapted some parts to be suitable for Rise as a platform. And we've used these curvy kind of wavy shapes to create that fluid feel. Again, trying to mimic that very dreamy, soft, I suppose non-jarring look to it. And you'll see that I've even gone as far as changing the colour of the tops and the clothing on the people used in this labelled graphic. And this might seem a little bit extreme, and I don't do it for every single project, but for this one particularly, I think it was necessary. I think originally this girl was wearing like a bright yellow top, and that against this very soft purple and blue colour scheme would have been very, very striking, and would have just pulled your eye away from what we want the learner to be focusing on, which wouldn't have necessarily been a massive issue in this instance, because they do need to click these markers, but it would feel really out of place against this very kind of, like this soft look. So I did a very quick Photoshop edit and changed the colour of their clothes. And again, to create something like this isn't necessary. You don't have to do this. If photo editing is not your bag, you don't know how to do it, it's not the end of the world. You don't need to do something like this. It's just that little extra added thing which helps bring together that kind of cohesiveness of the entire course. And even doing things like this, so this is just an image and text block in Rise, and all I've done is put the image inside a shape and just added those flowers for decoration. So even small touches like that, so here's the kind of bigger preview of it, even small touches like that can really help elevate your Rise courses beyond just square picture, square rectangle block. It just adding in that something extra. So let's go into Rise now, and I will just walk you through the settings that I changed, and the type of blocks that I've used to kind of create this finished look here. And here is the Rise build. And this was built using the micro-learning function of Rise. You can do with either. It works with the lessons as well, but I really like the micro-learning for Rise, and it's what I tend to use Rise for. So I always kind of default to this setting because it does make it easier in terms of the kind of fluidity, I suppose, of the page, because it is that one piece. But you can still achieve this effect using the sort of standard lesson approach too. So let's jump into the theme, and I'll just show you kind of the settings that I changed. So first was this cover page, and I just set it as a blank colour. This is the dark blue, and it is the same as the dark blue used in this first image here, so that they sort of marry into each other. But you don't necessarily have to do this, because you can actually turn the cover page off when you export to LMS. So if you are going to be exporting your course, you could just put this as whatever and just have it set that this is turned off anyway. So changing this setting isn't like the be all and end all of creating the rest of the course. With navigation, because this is a micro-learning, I've got it as continuous, so that it's a continuous scroll. Obviously, stepped would hinder that kind of fluid, seamless look. Colors is as it is. I've just changed the accent color to fit in with my color scheme. Same with fonts. And blocks, I've turned off the block animation, again, just to so it doesn't hinder that fluid continuous fill. So really, the settings are pretty much the same as you would set up any other bog standard Rise course. Much of creating this look is actually within the development of the course itself. So you can see that I start off with just a full width image. And if you are going to go down this route, you have to remember accessibility at all times. And I've inputted alt text for all of the times I've used imagery or imagery that contains text. So I could have done kind of a text over image block for this, but the problem is I wanted that text to remain central. And if I had a text over image block, the text would have moved around because Rise is responsive. So if we just look at this here on tablet view, you can see it remains central, even if I switch between landscape, portrait, and between devices as well. So that's kind of the first thing. And that's usually the way that I start off these sort of illustrated builds, is with a header image. And this way you can make it much more custom. If you add the image to the cover page, you can't always predict how it's going to behave in terms of that responsiveness. And it makes it much harder to get that seamless initial step between the cover page and the first part of your learning. And then much of this is very kind of simple, to be honest. I mean, we've got text back here with just a gradient background that then links into the next part. This is a column grid with custom icons. And again, it's that trial and error to make sure that these decorative bits on the side do not impact the content itself. So if I scroll down, you can see that actually the flowers disappear, which is kind of a toss-up you have to do, really, because I could have moved those in further, but then on desktop they looked really strange. And so it's a bit of you kind of have to play around with it and decide what's important. I mean, with this block, we've still got this lovely curvy line, so I didn't feel like it was necessary that the flowers were kind of imposing. And if they were, to be honest, with a smaller screen, it would have taken up a lot of space and been a bit distracting. So it works for desktop, but for tablet, I'm quite glad that they kind of disappear off the edge. So these as well, if I go back into edit view, these are more full width images, which just allow that kind of real customization of everything. And again, I've applied the alt text so that nothing is lost. We've got video block, statements are labeled graphic, which again just uses icons, which you can get from places like Flaticon and just recolor them. And then we got our carousel. So for this one was a bit tricky because on the original iSpring build, it was this lovely morph transition animated carousel, and you can't achieve that without a storyline block within Rise. So I had to kind of be a bit flexible with how I wanted this to look. And I decided that to keep the carousel and to have these as static images. So again, this very much meant adding the alt text, and also I added the caption as well, so that anybody using screen readers or any assistive technology would be able to also capture this information as well. I did originally try it as text and image, but I don't know, it just didn't look right. And I really wanted it to be quite impactful because I love this kind of mixed media and the layout of these. So it was just a little bit of reworking to make sure that things were still kind of functional and accessible and everything. We can see some full bleed imagery here, again overlaid with custom icons and things. So it follows a very simple structure, very much like any other Rise course that I would do. We've got text blocks, we've got making use of labeled graphics. There's no fancy JavaScript, there's no complicated storyline blocks. It really is these graphics that elevate the course itself. If I stripped it completely of the graphics, it wouldn't be anywhere near as impactful. And for me, this is where I emphasize the importance of visual design in e-learning development. There's obviously this mindset that content is king and, you know, content is the most important. But actually, whilst this content is solid because I went through a instructional design process to create it, without the visuals and the way that this looks, you're only getting half an experience. And this contributes to an entire learning experience. And as I said at the beginning, embodying this brand and really showing off and bringing through that premium feel. If something looks good and looks like a lot of thought has gone into it, it immediately gives you more confidence in the content. And for new employees, that's what you want. You want them to have confidence in this company, and trust that what they're saying is how they behave and is true, and is accurate. So, in my opinion, anyway, the visual design is just as important as content, and can really elevate the overall learning experience. And there we go, and it ends on a file block, which would be like a downloadable activity, but obviously. So there we go. And I really want to emphasize that this doesn't have to be super complicated. I know it can look overwhelming, and that it looks like something that might be really difficult to achieve, but use those stock sites, those royalty-free sites. Use Flaticon for icons, and start small. Start with potentially just adding a gradient background in, or just changing an image so that it's not a square, maybe putting an image in a circle like this, or a shape or something like that. If you're doing a character-based e-learning, maybe find some characters and add them in. Just small little things like that, which can start taking your Rise courses from blocky and a bit segmented to something that feels a bit more polished. So that is the end of my Restful Refreshments project, and I'm quite sad that it's done actually, but I really hope you've enjoyed following this along. And if you do have any questions at all, do feel free to drop them in the comments, and I will try my best to get round to them. And I will see you in the next one.